From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Home on the prairie. Why one musician is building a life and a career in the country. The fight for infant formula in the U.S. as Americans continue to deal with shortages. Some companies say they're ready to make it, so where's the supply?
What we've encouraged FDA to do is to bring more transparency to this process.
Curbing inflation. Congress moves closer to approving a major economic package. Democrats say will help, while others argue it will just raise your taxes.
The one thing I can tell you about this bill, it will not lower inflation.
We break down the impact on farm country right now on AgDay. Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. It's expected the U.S. House will vote on the Inflation Reduction Act on Friday, where it's expected to pass, and then head over to the president's desk for his signature. That's after the bill passed in the Senate on a vote of 51 to 50. In its current form, the bill is worth $740 billion and is 755 pages of tax, climate, and health care issues. But despite its name, the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office said the bill would have a negligible effect on inflation this year and into 2023. Now, here are some of the key details that pertain to ag. There is a $1 a gallon tax credit for biomass-based diesel, along with a temporary $1.25 per gallon tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel. There would also be funding for blender pumps and other biofuels infrastructure. Roughly $2 billion would be set aside for USDA's Rural Energy for America program, another $9.7 billion for rural electric cooperatives, and more than $5 billion for wildfire prevention. There's also $4 billion to combat drought in the West and $5.3 billion in farm debt relief, which includes $3.1 billion to distressed borrowers and $2.2 billion in payments to farmers who had experienced discrimination in USDA loan programs. Now, a big chunk, $18 billion, is for conservation programs. AgriTalk's Chip Flory discusses the plan with Farm Journal Washington analyst Jim Wiesmeyer.
This is a landmark bill, especially for Democrats, Chip, because this gives them several issues that they've been wanting for years, such as the Obamacare, don't let it expire, some key provisions, and now that'll last through the 2024 elections. Healthcare provisions, especially for Medicare recipients, are major.
Now, the bill would also provide tax credits for things like solar panels and electric HVAC systems, and it extends a credit for electric vehicles. To pay for it all, the bill includes a 15% corporate minimum tax for businesses with at least $1 billion in net income. Tax expert Paul Neiffer says at that threshold, it will not affect farm businesses. Republicans are also concerned the oil and gas tax provisions could mean higher gas prices and higher utility bills. Happening right now, 6 more ships carrying ag cargo held up by the war in Ukraine have left the country's Black Sea ports. The body that oversees an international deal said the loaded vessels were cleared to depart on Sunday. The goal is to get 20 million tons of grain out of Ukraine to feed people around the world. The 4 ships that left over the weekend were loaded with close to 170,000 metric tons of food. Now, they're headed for Italy, China, and Turkey. 2 others left yesterday, and also 1 ship entered a Ukrainian port on Sunday. Now, the UN estimates 47 million people worldwide are having trouble putting food on the table because of the war. Ukraine's president says the food exports are good news, but it shouldn't be taken for granted as the war continues. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden visiting eastern Kentucky yesterday, meeting with families who have suffered from the historic flooding there. At least 37 people have died after last month's heavy rain. Flooding remains a threat with more storms in the forecast this week. Hot and humid conditions persist across the country, but some areas are in for a bit of a break. Meteorologist Matt Yurisovic has the very latest.
Yeah, Clinton, it's going to be another warm one across most of the country, right up through the middle part of the country. Temperatures getting back into the 90s and closing in on 100 degrees in parts of Oklahoma and Texas, even down across the Gulf Coast. Still a lot of humidity in those parts, and a little bit of a break from the heat and humidity across the upper Midwest, parts of the Great Lakes and the Corn Belt, dealing with temperatures in the 70s and low 80s and all that humidity moving on out of here behind that front and those thunderstorms that moved through during the day yesterday, and still hot and dry with those monsoon showers and thunderstorms in the west. That's going to continue to be the case as we head over the next couple of days. You see the precipitation here. A lot going on. Scattered showers and thunderstorms for parts of the Ohio Valley all the way down to the Gulf Coast and over towards the Atlantic as well. And then we've got more of those monsoon showers and storms pretty much every afternoon this week out in the southwest. Nevada and California going to get in on some of that. And one thing we haven't talked a lot about this year has been the tropics, finally tracking something out there. It's well in the eastern Atlantic, but something we've got to keep an eye on, as we could be watching some development now that we're later in the season. We could be watching a lot of storm systems begin to move their way across from Africa, something we'll continue to keep an eye on here over the next month or two. And watch this dog, Mary Beth Griffiths. We think Clinton knows her, sharing this video from northern Indiana. She says their border collie will try and herd anything. Just look at it chasing down the crop dusting helicopter. Clinton, looks like you have a farm dog on your hands. I'll have more on your forecast coming up.
China has announced it is cutting off bilateral ties with the U.S. in a wide range of areas, including military, immigration, and climate issues. It follows Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, which China considers a serious violation of its One China principle. But despite that announcement, USDA on Friday announced a sale of 132,000 metric tons of new crop soybeans to China and the same amount of new crop beans to unknown destinations. China also bought another 132,000 metric tons of new crop beans on Monday. There was also a sale of 120,000 metric tons of new crop corn to unknown destinations. Up next, we'll dig into the dairy markets and the outlook for the rest of 2022. And later, trading the pavement of city life for the prairie views of South Dakota. I mean, a woman adjusting to work on the range in the country.
Ag Day is brought to you by the End Zone by Farm Shop MFG, which allows you to rehydrate your soybeans from 10 to 13%. On a 20,000 bushel bin, that's an extra semi-load added to your bottom line. Order your End Zone fan control by August 31st and receive $200 off.
Mike North with EverAg, our guest today. Mike, as we look at what's been going on with these dairy markets at the start of August, what's your read on where we sit right now? Sounds like there's been some movement on the kind of the world stage as far as pricing and demand goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Domestically, we've been slowly starting to ratchet up our production as we add more cows. But as we've talked in the past, the rest of the world has not been keeping up with that, and milk production suppressed in those other milk sheds. But from a demand perspective, we've been watching as some growing concern around the retraction in Chinese buying has led to some softer world markets, specifically out of what we refer to as the global dairy trade, which is an auction that takes place every 2 weeks and primarily features product coming out of Oceania, or that New Zealand, Australia region that we watch so closely. We saw that index of prices across a group of 8 products fall by 5%, led largely by milk powders, which have continued to fall. And we've watched that now here in the United States as our product is trying to remain competitive against that product. So powder now back to $1.50. And if you look at where we've been over the course of the year, that is the lowest price that we've registered, and fully 35 cents off of where we were back in June. So sure, some pretty sizable drops there.
Do you expect continued pressure here on these markets as we move through the second half of this year, or second half, last quarter? I mean, however we want to define it, right?
Well, that world market, I think, is certainly in a place where that could remain soft, and so those ingredient products of powder and whey, which are largely what we ship into a lot of those different markets, likely will stay a little bit softer. What we're hoping to see is some added strength in product. And when I say that, I mean things like cheese and some of your higher end whey proteins and some of your butters and fat products. Those markets have been very, very strong, especially the butter side of things, which today trades north of $3 a price that we haven't visited for 7 years, but a great price. And that's really been helping that class 4 market here in the United States. That cheese market, though, has been, one to really watch. And it's been soft of late as we've watched prices drop back into that $1.80 zone. But we're really hoping as we can get into the Q4 period that we can push $2 again and bring these prices back up into some levels that we've been watching through the spring and early summer.
All right, appreciate it, Mike. Thank you so much for being here and giving us a little perspective. We'll be back with more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
To contact Mike, visit www.ever.ag or give him a call at 608-518-3106. Ag Day is brought to you by MetLife Investment Management's Agricultural Finance Group. MetLife Investment Management is positioned to help you grow your business with a competitive farm, ranch, and agribusiness loan. To learn more, visit investments.metlife.com/agriculture.
2022 just had one of the hottest Julys on record globally. Now that's according to the EU's climate monitor Copernicus. In Europe, the heat waves brought record-breaking temperatures in the west and north. Water reservoirs were at very low levels in several parts of the EU, with hot and dry conditions affecting the production of grains on the continent. Meteorologist Matt Yurosavik joining us here. Matt, hot and dry in parts of our country, especially out on the west coast, and it looks like more heat this week.
Yeah, definitely the heat's still going to be there. The humidity through the middle part of the country. The only thing is there is more chances of rain, especially in the southeast and the southwest as we head through the second half of the week. And you can see that ridge building in the west again as we head through the middle part of the week. What we are going to be watching, though, is still for those monsoon showers and storms back in the southwest, and then a little bit of relief from that heat and humidity across the east as we head through the rest of this week. The ridge continues out in the west. That's going to keep it very hot and dry through the middle part of the country. Notice, though, kind of an upper low spinning off of the coast of the Pacific Northwest. That's going to keep things unsettled back there, and then a little bit of relief coming in for the interior parts of New England. We're going to continue to see that as it moves eastward, but the ridge does not go anywhere, so the heat and humidity staying with us for much of this week and into the weekend, right for the center part of the country where that heat has been very high for the last couple of weeks. Here's the temperatures this afternoon. 90s and triple digits right up through the middle of the country. 80s and 90s out in the west, and some 70s and 80s up across the Gulf Coast, or up across the Great Lakes and into New England, where we are going to be looking at lower humidity out there. And you can really see that with temperatures dropping back into the lower 60s and upper 50s there, the lack of humidity allowing that to happen. And then more of the same as we head through tomorrow. Temperatures a little bit cooler through the middle of the country by a few degrees, but still warm and humid across the east. And here's a look at those feels like temperatures through the afternoon. 99 in Tulsa, 100 down in Dallas. Temperatures feeling a little bit better up across the Great Lakes there. And then here's a look. This is the front that's kind of sweeping the humidity out. High pressure moving in from the north, and then the monsoon showers and storms going on back in the west. That's going to continue to be the case really every afternoon through the rest of this week, and then more of those afternoon scattered showers and storms across parts of the Ohio Valley and across the southeast as we head through tomorrow and the next couple of days as well. So the precipitation chances are still there, and the heat and humidity stick with us as well, and we'll continue to track that right here on Ag Day. That's a look around the country. Now let's take a look at the weather where you live. Clayton Lake, Maine, heavy rain and thunderstorms, a high near 62 degrees. Tulsa, Oklahoma, a chance for thunderstorms with a high near 93 degrees. And Prescott, Arizona, heavy rain and thunderstorms possible, a high near 82 degrees.
Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Out-of-stock rates for infant formula improved slightly the last week of July, but shortages persist. The latest numbers from Information Resources, Inc., a Chicago-based market research firm, show in the week ending July 31st, more than 27% of powdered baby formula was out of stock at U.S. retailers, its lowest rate, however, since June 12th. When looking at all types of baby formula, 18% was out of stock. Now, before the nationwide recall and manufacturing shutdown at Abbott earlier this year, out-of-stock rates were about 10%. FDA leadership says formula production needs to remain at a high level for at least 6 to 8 more weeks as it works to steady supplies and add inventory from foreign providers, a process dairy industry leaders tell me is moving slowly.
What we've encouraged FDA to do is to bring more transparency to this process. So once our members apply for a letter of enforcement discretion, if you're not interested in them, you're not going to work with them, let them know that. Once you've asked for information and they've supplied the information you need, assign an FDA person as a point of contact for them so that they know where they are, because they're spending money to get prepared to deliver the quantity of infant formula that you've asked, that they've promised to deliver. That takes preparations, and then they get no response from the FDA.
Now, some of the world's largest formula manufacturers say they applied to help ship product to the U.S. back in May and have yet to hear a response. Dykes expects more movement from FDA in the coming weeks. Now, last Friday, it did greenlight Nestle to ship 37,000 cans of specialty formula to the U.S. I have more about the infant formula shortage over at agweb.com. 2 dairy plants in the South are scheduled to close before the end of the year. Farm Journal's dairyherd.com reporting that Borden Dairy plans to close its Dothan, Alabama and Hattiesburg, Mississippi plants by September 30th. Now, Borden says it could no longer support continued production at the plants. The company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection back in 2020. It's been a trend since the pandemic started. City folks moving out to the country. We'll meet a new South Dakota rancher and find out why she traded the pavement for the prairie in the country.
Registration is open for the 2022 Pro Farmer Crop Tour. Join our team as we gain insight on the 2022 growing season in person or online. Visit profarmercroptour.com/register to select the stop nearest you.
She was born a city girl, living in places such as Detroit, Minneapolis, and New York. But a woman named Eliza Blue has now found her forever home on a ranch just outside of Bison, South Dakota. Jody Kurzman of KFYR reports on what drew Eliza to prairie life.
Eliza Blue.
Now we'll find out.
And her 2 young children spend their mornings doing chores.
All right, come here then.
There are lambs to feed, goats to check.
Isn't he just too much?
And a garden to tend.
That's all we have yet.
This is a life that a dozen years ago,
you're a good boy,
Eliza never dreamed she'd be living.
Was working full-time as a musician, and I knew I was in a rut, and I knew I needed to get out. This really was meant to be a temporary adventure.
Instead, she fell in love, got married.
From urbanite to ranch wife.
And this became her forever home.
It was pretty much a total 180-degree turn. In that I'd only ever lived in cities.
Now she can't imagine living anywhere else.
It does feel natural to me now. This little house was meant to be a guest house.
Instead, it's become Eliza's studio. Here in this tiny house come the big sounds of Eliza's music.
Spend the summer in the rain country.
Now Eliza hopes to share this small space with other artists.
Now I'm taking the long road back. We're very remote. There aren't recording studios on every street corner here in Western South Dakota. So the goal is to be able to use this space to bring other artists to share their work.
It's another dream discovered here, where the quiet of the South Dakota prairie is interrupted only by the soundtrack of Eliza Blue's life. Near Bison, South Dakota, I'm Jody Kurzman, reporting for your news leader.
When I found you, I had nothing.
All right, thanks Jody and KFYR for that story. Now, Eliza's not only a musician, she's also a writer. Her work has appeared in the New York Times. She's also written a book and has a weekly newspaper column that is carried by 17 different publications across the country. And that's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day out in Farm Country.